During spring break of 2019, me and a few college buddies planned a day-and-a-half long trip up to Yellowstone. We lived in Nevada and it was close to a 10-hour drive. Me and my roommate Joey had carpooled together on the ride there, and due to some schedule conflicts, we ended up leaving later than everyone else on the way back. So our drive ended up continuing deep into the night when we were only a little over halfway through. At some point, I remember driving down this extremely desolate highway that was going through a large canyon. I can't even tell you where the exact location could have been, honestly, but I knew it was somewhere in Utah. Anyways, it had been over an hour since I had seen another car pass, and even longer since the last town we had passed through, just to give you an idea of how middle of nowhere this place really was. Anyways, at some point while driving through this dark canyon, we took a sharp bend around the corner, and I nearly leapt out of my skin and had to slam on the brakes when the headlights fell upon a mysterious sight right around the corner. There was a man standing in the middle of the road, hunched over a woman lying flat on the road. As soon as he looked up and saw us, he started waving his hands frantically and ran towards our car. Me and Joey exchanged glances as this guy walked right up to the driver's side window and yelled that he needed help. I wasn't ready to roll down the window just yet. I yelled through the window to him, asking what was wrong. He said he thought his wife was in a seizure or something because she was unresponsive and he didn't have a phone to call for help. I turned to Joey again. He shrugged. Something didn't seem right here to me. The man and his wife both looked normal enough, but where was their car? Why were they just standing in the road like this? And why didn't the man have a phone? These oddities, along with how late it was and how secluded we were, was really making me hesitant about helping this guy at all. I turned to the man and said we'd call 911 for him. He started frantically shouting, asking if either of us knew CPR. I asked him why, and he said he needed someone to do CPR for his wife since she was unresponsive and he didn't know CPR. Against my protest, being the good Samaritan he is, Joey started getting out of the car. I didn't try to stop him, but I figured I'd call 911 for the man. The man started leading Joey towards his wife's body in the road. At that point, I saw I had no service on my phone. I looked up towards Joey, and for a split second, I swear to God, I saw the woman close one of her eyes. This wasn't adding up. No way his wife was unresponsive as she was opening her eyes. That, along with the red flags I noticed about this whole scene, started becoming more real to me. I heard a slight sound then, like the rustle of a bush, or a twig snap from within the canyon walls to the side. I began to see dozens, and I mean dozens, of hooded silhouettes beginning to emerge from the boulders and shrubbery around the sides of the road. I screamed Joey's name and put the car in drive. He began racing back towards my car, but the man was hot on his tail. As soon as he opened the door, I floored it. The man lunged at Joey, but he was able to close the door in time. The wind in the road sat up and glared at us as we drove past, along with about 20 or so men in hoods and hats obscuring their faces, emerging from the darkness and lunging at our car. I did about 95 down that road, swerving around corners and braking constantly as we finally exited the canyon. We drove about 10 miles further until we hit the next town, and from there we phoned the police and explained the situation. Having not much else to do, we continued on our trip without issue. I don't know if anything ever became of what we witnessed in that canyon, but I just hope those people weren't able to catch anyone else in their trap. It was Christmas time, and I was on a road trip by myself back from my aunt's house, where my extended family had met up for a reunion. It had admittedly been a night involving lots of drinks, and I definitely don't condone drinking and driving, but it was around 4 a.m. and I had left early to try and beat the Christmas Eve traffic back home. Plus I had work the following day and I needed to get home and get some sleep beforehand. My aunt lived 3 hours away, so it wasn't the longest drive in the world, but after partying for about 8 hours beforehand, I was wrecked. It was snowing heavily, and due to my current condition, I was making sure to keep under the speed limit. Only about 20 minutes of my drive, I found myself sort of lost. I was on some unnamed back road that wasn't even showing up on my GPS. I know I must have taken a wrong turn somewhere, but I couldn't exactly pinpoint where. The road was so small I couldn't even turn around on it. There wasn't any space on the shoulders either, so my only option was to continue driving until I hit an intersection or somewhere I would have enough space to turn my car around. The further I drove, the denser the woods around me got, and at this point I had been driving on this road for what must have been 30 minutes, and I hadn't seen another car, house, or any sign of civilization. I started to panic, thinking I'd really gotten myself lost, as my GPS had placed me literally in the middle of wilderness for miles. Then I felt the road turn to gravel, and soon to dirt, and not long afterwards it just completely dead-ended. The rest of the path seemed to be completely swallowed up by the forest. To my right, I noticed what appeared to be a small trail leading into the woods. Fortunately, I drive a fairly small Toyota Camry, so I figured I'd try doing a 3-point turn into the trailhead. As I began my turn and my car hood faced the trailhead, my headlights fell upon a man in a heavy black jacket and jeans, walking across the trail and towards the forest. He froze when my headlights landed on him, and I saw he was dragging a large black trash bag on the ground behind him. It looked like a human-sized bag. I also saw 2 shovels leaning against a tree trunk behind him. I managed to get my car turned completely around and continued down the road, not looking back. Another 45 minutes of driving later, the forest became more sparse, and soon I was able to find where I had taken a wrong turn. I made it the rest of the way home without issue. I'm still not entirely sure what I witnessed that night. I looked up the area later on Google Maps, and the entire place is forest for about 1,000 acres, and that road I accidentally stumbled across is the only road through it. I can't even imagine why that man was so far out in those woods without a car, because I definitely would have seen one on the road if there had been one. Why was he out there? What was he doing? And what was in that bag? At the time this happened, when I was like 16 or 17, I'm 23 now. Me and my friend Jake had driven about 5 miles 2 towns over to hit up this really good skate spot. We live in rural Michigan, so everything was really far apart with mostly wilderness in between. This particular skate spot was a parking lot for some bowling alley that was torn down a million years ago, so it was just some empty parking lot in the middle of forest and farmland. We arrived in the late afternoon and skated for about 4 hours. There was a lot of forest stairs and ramps around, so we were able to occupy our time till the sun was almost down, and then we got in the car to start heading back, since it was a 2-hour drive back home. It was winter and late already, so by the time we were halfway through the drive back, it was pitch black out. We had been driving on the same long, straight road for most of the time through forest and only passing other cars sporadically. At some point during the drive, I found myself needing to piss extremely bad. Jake told me to hold it, but after 5 more minutes, I couldn't bear it anymore. Jake begrudgingly pulled the car to the shoulder, and I ran out into the forest a few yards to do my business. Now this is where the freaky shit starts happening. As I'm pissing, I swear to God I start hearing the sound of multiple voices whispering. The thing that's so freaky about it, let alone hearing whispering in the middle of the woods at night, was the fact that I couldn't tell where these whispers were coming from because they seemed like they were echoing all around me. And at one point they seemed like they were so far away and faint I could barely hear them. And then the next, they seemed so close I would snap my head around in fear, but still not see anything. So at this point I finished peeing, and I'm just looking all around me and doing 360s because these whispers were freaking me out so much. But for some reason, don't ask me why, I was too afraid to make a run for the car. I thought that if I moved, whoever it was would know where I was and come after me. All of a sudden, from directly behind me, I heard the words so loud and aggressive I literally jumped and shouted. It was the harsh voice of a man saying, "Get out." I turned around and I still couldn't make out anything in the darkness until I noticed something moving in front of me. Something bright that stood out in the dark. I heard leaves rustling, and it took me a second to realize that what I was seeing was 4 or so human hands reaching out of the underbrush in front of me. It took me that long to realize I wasn't sticking around to find out who was there. I ran back to the car and shouted at Jake to floor it as soon as I got in. He did so. After about half a minute of me trying to process what the hell just happened and Jake asking me what was wrong, I finally explained what I had seen in the forest. He seemed just as freaked out about it as I was and couldn't come up with an explanation more logical than I could. We talked about the rest of the ride home, but after that we pretty much forgot about it, other than bringing it up occasionally to our other friends. To be honest, I'm not even sure if Jake believes me either, since I was the only one who saw it. But I know for a fact that what I saw was real.